The crack of her rifle echoed across the dusty plains as 3 ranch hands dove for cover behind a weathered fence. From her position on the barn roof, Elena Vasquez tracked them through her rifle's sights, the weapon steady in her practiced hands. "That was your only warning shot, gentlemen," she called down, her voice carrying on the hot Texas air. "The next one won't be aimed at the dirt. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." The year was 1899, and Willow Creek Ranch in the Texas Panhandle was a place caught between 2 worlds. My name is Elena Vasquez, though most folks around here just called me the Mexican Maid until that fateful day. It's amazing how quickly people's perception can change when they discover what you're truly capable of. 8 months ago, my life had been entirely different. I was working at a small cantina in a border town when Thomas Crawford, a legendary marksman known throughout the West, stopped in during a thunderstorm. He was older then, his shooting days behind him, but his eyes still sharp as he watched me handle a troublesome drunk with surprising efficiency. "You've got quick hands, Senorita," he remarked as I wiped down his table afterward, "and you don't scare easy." I smiled politely, used to comments from travelers. "When you grow up with 5 brothers, you learn to stand your ground, Senor." Crawford nodded thoughtfully, sipping his whiskey. "Ever fired a gun?" The question surprised me. "My father taught all his children. Said in this country, it was a necessary skill." "And how good are you?" I hesitated, then answered truthfully. "Better than my brothers, though they'd never admit it." Something sparked in Crawford's eyes. "I'm heading north to my sister's ranch. She needs household help after her husband passed. It pays better than this place, I'd wager." That simple conversation changed everything. Crawford's sister, Martha Blackwood, was a stern widow struggling to maintain Willow Creek Ranch after her husband's death. She needed household help, and Crawford had convinced her to hire me. What he didn't tell her was why he'd really brought me north. "Martha only sees a maid," Crawford told me as we rode toward the ranch. "But I see someone with a natural gift that shouldn't be wasted. I'll teach you everything I know about shooting, if you're willing to learn." I was puzzled. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" His expression turned distant. "I never had children to pass my knowledge to. Seems a shame to let it die with me." He glanced at me. "Besides, in this world, a woman alone needs every advantage she can get." Life at Willow Creek settled into a rhythm. Mornings spent cooking, cleaning, and helping Martha with household tasks. Afternoons, whenever I could slip away, Crawford would meet me in a hidden gully behind the ranch, teaching me everything he knew about firearms. "Feel the balance here," he'd say, placing his prized Winchester in my hands. "Every gun speaks its own language. You need to learn to listen." I soaked up his lessons, partly from genuine interest, partly from respect for the old marksman's knowledge. Crawford was patient but demanding, making me practice the same shot dozens of times until it became second nature. "Precision first, then speed," he'd remind me. "Anyone can fire a gun quickly. Few can hit exactly what they're aiming at every single time." Martha remained unaware of our lessons, seeing me only as the quiet maid who kept her house in order. The ranch hands barely acknowledged my existence, apart from occasional leering glances or dismissive comments about the help, Jackson Reeves. The ranch foreman was the worst of them. A tall, broad-shouldered man with cold eyes and a mean streak that showed whenever Martha wasn't around. "Crawford's getting soft in his old age," I overheard him tell another hand one evening. "Bringing a Mexican girl here when there's plenty of local folk needing work." But I kept my head down, did my job, and practiced with Crawford whenever possible. His hands, though aged, moved with remarkable precision when demonstrating how to clean a weapon or adjust sights for different distances. "You have a natural eye," he told me after a particularly good shooting session. "Better than most men." I've taught. Then came the day that changed everything. 4 months into my time at Willow Creek, Crawford fell ill. A winter cough that settled deep in his chest and wouldn't let go. "It's just a cold," he insisted, but I could see the pain in his eyes when he coughed. Martha called for the doctor from town, but the weather turned, bringing a blizzard that trapped us at the ranch. By morning, Crawford's condition had worsened significantly. I sat with him through that long night, watching his breathing grow more labored. Near dawn, he gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Elena," his voice was barely a whisper, "there's something you should know." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Save your strength, I urged. He shook his head. "No time. In my trunk, false bottom. You'll find something important. My legacy." Before he could explain further, he was seized by a coughing fit that left him gasping. When Martha checked on him an hour later, Thomas Crawford was gone. We buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch once the storm cleared. Martha stood stoic and dry-eyed, while I felt a loss deeper than I'd expected after knowing the man such a short time. That evening, I slipped into Crawford's room. Martha had asked me to pack his belongings, saying she couldn't bear to do it herself. The trunk sat at the foot of his bed, heavy and worn with years of travel. I ran my fingers along the bottom, finding the edge of the false panel he'd mentioned. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, a folded document, and a wooden box containing the most beautiful revolver I'd ever seen. Silver inlay decorated the grip, and the barrel gleamed in the lamplight. The name Truth Finder was etched delicately along one side. The document was a deed, I realized with shock. Thomas Crawford had owned half of Willow Creek Ranch and had left his share to me, his apprentice and friend, as the paper stated. The journal contained detailed accounts of Crawford's life, including troubling revelations about Willow Creek's history. According to his writings, the ranch had originally belonged to a Mexican family before being seized through fraudulent means by Martha's late husband. Crawford had bought his half-share as a form of penance, planning to eventually make things right. Martha didn't know. Or if she did, she'd chosen to ignore the truth. But others knew, particularly Jackson Reeves, who'd helped orchestrate the original theft of the land. I sat back, stunned by the revelations. What was I supposed to do with this information? If I revealed the deed, claiming my rightful half of the ranch, would anyone in these parts honor the claim of a Mexican maid against an established widow? I decided to wait, to continue as before while I considered my options. Crawford had been teaching me more than just shooting, I realized. He'd been preparing me for this moment, knowing what would likely happen when the truth emerged. Life at the ranch changed after Crawford's death. Martha grew more withdrawn, leaving Jackson Reeves to handle most ranch business. The foreman's authority expanded, and with it, his true nature emerged more openly. "Clean that again," he ordered one evening, kicking mud across the kitchen floor. I just scrubbed. "And be quick about it. The men need their supper." I bit my tongue, remembering my place, at least the place they thought I occupied. But at night, I continued practicing with Crawford's revolver, maintaining my skills away from prying eyes. 2 weeks after Crawford's death, I overheard a conversation that chilled my blood. Reeves was in Martha's study, their voices carrying through the partially open door as I dusted the hallway. "We have a problem, Mrs. Blackwood," Reeves said. "Crawford's lawyer in town is asking questions about the old man's will." "What will?" Martha's voice was sharp. "Thomas didn't have anything to leave except his personal effects." "Apparently he did. Word is he left something to the maid." A long silence followed. "That's ridiculous. What would he leave her?" "Don't know, ma'am. But if there's papers regarding the ranch's history, it could be trouble. You know what your husband did to get this land." "That was business," Martha snapped. "The Mexicans couldn't prove their claim. The law sided with us. Because we paid the judge, Reeves said bluntly. But if Crawford kept records, the storage barn was dusty and seldom used. I'd been sent to organize the preserved goods, a task that would normally take days. I worked steadily, all senses alert, listening for approaching footsteps. They came just after midday. Reeves and 2 ranch hands entered, blocking the only door. Find anything interesting in Crawford's? Things? Reeves asked without preamble. I kept my expression neutral. Just clothing and personal items, as Mrs. Blackwood saw. Funny thing, he stepped closer. I could have sworn the old man kept a fancy revolver, silver inlay, custom grip, valuable piece. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? No, Senator, I lied. Perhaps he sold it before he passed. One of the ranch hands snickered. Maybe she took it. These people are always stealing. I stiffened but kept my composure. Crawford's voice seemed to whisper in my memory. The first skill of shooting isn't pulling the trigger. It's knowing when to keep your fingers steady. Reeves circled me slowly. I think you're lying, girl. I think Crawford told you things about this ranch, about its history. Maybe even left you something. I was just his maid, I replied evenly. Nothing more. See, I don't believe that. He grabbed my arm suddenly. The way he watched you, taught you things when he thought no one was looking. I saw you too, sneaking off to the gully. Fear and anger surged through me in equal measure, but I kept my face impassive. He was teaching me English, Senator, to better serve in the house. Reeves laughed, a harsh sound without humor. Is that what they call it? Well, whatever he was teaching you, playtime's over. You're packing your things and leaving Willow Creek today, with nothing but the clothes on your back. Mrs. Blackwood hired me, I countered. Only she can dismiss me. Mrs. Blackwood does what I tell her. Reeves tightened his grip. This ranch is mine in all but name, and soon enough, I'll fix that too. The widow won't last a year if she keeps drinking the way she has since her brother died. The naked ambition in his voice confirmed everything in Crawford's journal. This man had helped steal the land once and was positioning to take complete control now. You have 1 hour to leave, he continued. If you're still here after that, these boys will escort you to the county line, and trust me, you don't want that kind of escort. After they left, I stood in the silent barn, weighing my options. Running meant abandoning what Crawford had entrusted to me. Staying meant facing dangerous men who wouldn't hesitate to harm me. I thought of Crawford's lessons, his patience, his belief in me. I thought of the truth he'd wanted revealed. And I made my decision. An hour later, when Reeves and his men came looking for me, I was gone from the storage barn, but not from Willow Creek Ranch. The confrontation would come, but it would be on my terms, not theirs. The hands they'd sent to escort me off the property returned frustrated, reporting they couldn't find me anywhere. Reeves ordered a thorough search of the ranch buildings, convinced I was hiding somewhere. Find her, I heard him tell the men from my hiding place in the hayloft of the main barn. She knows too much to just let her walk away. I waited until nightfall before slipping out. My first stop was my room in the servants' quarters to retrieve Crawford's revolver, journal, and the deed. Then I made my way to Martha Blackwood's house. The widow was alone in her study, a glass of whiskey in her hand, staring at nothing. She startled when I emerged from the shadows. "What are you? How did you get in here?" she demanded. "I need to speak with you, Mrs. Blackwood, about your brother and about this ranch." Her eyes narrowed. "Reeves said you were gone." "Reeves says many things that aren't true," I replied, placing Crawford's journal on the desk before her. "Just as your late husband did when he stole this land from its rightful owners." Color drained from her face. "You don't know what you're talking about. Your brother knew. It's why he bought half this ranch to eventually make things right." I placed the deed beside the journal. He left his share to me. Martha laughed. "A brittle sound. A Mexican maid?" No one will honor that claim. The law will, once they see these documents and read what your brother recorded about how this land was acquired. She reached for the papers, but I was faster pulling them back. Your foreman plans to take this entire ranch from you, I told her. He's just waiting for the right moment or for the whiskey to finally kill you. Martha's hand trembled on her glass. Why should I believe you? Read the journal, I suggested. Your brother detailed everything, including conversations between Reeves and your husband that he overheard years ago. Reluctantly, she took the journal, flipping through pages with increasing dismay. Thomas knew all this. Why didn't he ever say anything? Perhaps he was waiting for the right moment. Or perhaps he was gathering proof. Either way, he wanted justice to be done. Martha closed the journal, studying me with new eyes. What do you want? What's rightfully mine half this ranch? And for the truth to be known about how the previous owners were cheated. If this gets out, I'll be ruined, she whispered. You have a choice, Mrs. Blackwood. Partner with me to make this right, or I take everything to the authorities. She stared at me for a long moment. Reeves won't let this happen. He has men loyal to him, men who will do whatever he says without question. I know, I said calmly. That's why we need to be prepared when we confront him. A noise from outside interrupted us horses approaching at speed. Martha moved to the window. It's Reeves and his men. Someone must have seen you come here. I nodded, strangely calm. Crawford had prepared me for this moment, though neither of us had known exactly how it would unfold. Mrs. Blackwood, I said quietly, I need you to make a choice right now. Stand with me, or stand with the man who plans to take everything from you. She hesitated only briefly. What do you need me to do? Boots thundered on the porch. I moved quickly to position myself as Martha opened the door to Reeves's loud knock. Mrs. Blackwood, he removed his hat with mock politeness. Apologies for the late hour, but we're looking for the maid. She's stolen something valuable and needs to be dealt with. Elena? Martha feigned surprise. What could she possibly have stolen? That's my concern, ma'am. Just tell me if you've seen her. Actually, Martha's voice strengthened. She's here. We've been having a very interesting conversation about my brother's will and the true history of Willow Creek Ranch. Reeves's false smile vanished. With all due respect, ma'am, you shouldn't believe anything that girl says. She's been filling your head with lies. The only liar here is you, Reeves. I stepped into view, Crawford's journal in one hand, truth finder concealed in the folds of my skirt. I know everything, how this ranch was stolen, how you helped orchestrate it, and how you're planning to take it from Mrs. Blackwood next. His face darkened. You're overplaying your hand, girl. No one will take your word over mine in these parts. They will with proof. I held up the journal. Thomas Crawford documented everything. Reeves glanced at his men, who had spread out behind him. Give me that book and that fancy gun I know you took, and maybe you walk away from this alive. Elena, Martha said quietly, perhaps we should listen to your employer, Reeves cut in. Be smart about this. I maintained my calm, remembering Crawford's lessons. The problem, Mr. Reeves, is that Mrs. Blackwood isn't just my employer anymore. According to this deed, I own half of Willow Creek Ranch. That makes us partners. The ranch hands exchanged uncertain glances, but Reeves merely laughed. A Mexican maid, part owner of one of the biggest ranches in the county, that'll be the day. The law won't care about my background when they see these documents, I replied. And they'll be very interested in the story of how this land was stolen. Enough of this, Reeves nodded to his men. Take her, get that journal. As they moved forward, I drew Truth Finder in one smooth motion, just as Crawford had taught me. The ranch hands froze at the sight of the gleaming revolver. I wouldn't, I warned, my voice steady. Thomas Crawford taught me more than just English lessons. Reeves sneered. You think waving that gun around impresses me? You don't have the nerve to use it." In answer, I adjusted my aim slightly and fired. The bullet shattered a whiskey bottle on the sideboard inches from Reeves's head. Glass and liquor sprayed across the wall. "That was your only warning shot," I said evenly as the echo faded. "The next one won't miss." The ranch hands backed away, hands raised, but Reeves stood his ground, fury in his eyes. "You've made a mistake, girl. A deadly one." His hand moved toward his own gun, but I was faster, just as Crawford had trained me to be. "Truth finder," barked again, and Reeves's gun clattered to the floor, his hand bleeding where the bullet had grazed it. "Jesus," one of the hands whispered. "She shoots like Crawford." "Better," I corrected, keeping my aim steady. "He said so himself." Reeves clutched his bleeding hand, hatred burning in his eyes. "This isn't over." "Actually, it is," Martha stepped forward, a shotgun in her hands that she'd retrieved from beside the door. "You're finished at Willow Creek, Jackson. You and any man still loyal to you." The next morning dawned clear and cold over Willow Creek Ranch. Word spread quickly about the confrontation, about Crawford's will, and about the maid who could outshoot any man on the property. Some hands quit immediately, unwilling to work under the new arrangement. Others, tired of Reeves's tyranny, chose to stay. Martha Blackwood and I sat in her study, paperwork spread between us as we formalized our partnership. "You could have taken it all," she said quietly. "With these documents, you could have exposed both me and my late husband." I nodded. I could have. But Crawford didn't want vengeance, he wanted justice. This land should be shared, managed well, and its history acknowledged. Why did my brother never tell me himself? I considered this. Perhaps he tried in his way. Or perhaps he was waiting for the right moment, a moment that never came. We signed the papers that would register our partnership officially. Martha hesitated with the pen over the final document. "The men won't like taking orders from a Mexican woman," she warned. "Even one who shoots like you do." I smiled slightly. "Then they'll learn, or they'll find other work. Willow Creek is changing. The days of stolen land and stolen justice are ending." Later that afternoon, I stood on the porch watching new hands being trained by the few who'd chosen to stay. One man approached, older than the others, his weathered face respectful. "Ma'am," he removed his hat. "The boys and I were wondering if what they say is true about you hitting a tin can at 60 yards, like old Crawford used to do." I studied him, then the distant fence line where a row of cans had been placed. Without a word, I drew Truth Finder, took aim, and fired 5 shots in rapid succession. 5 cans flew off the fence. A low whistle went up from the watching men. "Crawford taught you good," the old hand said with newfound respect. "He did," I agreed, holstering the revolver. "He also taught me that respect isn't given, it's earned. Just like trust." "Yes, ma'am," he nodded. "Reckon we're all learning that lesson now." As he walked away, I looked out over the ranch, my ranch now in part. The land that had once been stolen would now be managed justly. The skills Crawford had patiently taught me had given me more than just protection. They had given me a voice in a world that had tried to render me invisible. From unlikely maid to respected ranch owner, it wasn't the future I had envisioned when I first arrived at Willow Creek. But as Crawford used to say during our lessons, life rarely goes where you expect. The trick is being prepared when it takes an unexpected turn. I placed my hand on Truth Finder's grip, feeling its perfect balance, just as he had taught me. "Thank you," I whispered to the memory of the old marksman who had seen something in me worth nurturing. The ranch hands had returned to their work, no longer laughing at the Mexican maid, no longer dismissing me as beneath their notice. My shooting skills had silenced their mockery, but it would be my leadership that would earn their lasting respect. This was just the beginning. Willow Creek Ranch had a new future ahead, one bullet, one decision, one day at a time. Word spread. quickly across the Texas Panhandle about the Mexican Maid who had outshot Jackson, Reeves, and claimed her rightful place as half-owner of Willow Creek Ranch. Some dismissed it as tall tales. Others came to see for themselves if the stories were true. I found myself becoming something of a local legend, a position as uncomfortable as it was unexpected. "There she is," visitors would whisper when I walked through town. "The shooting. Maid of Willow Creek." Martha Blackwood observed these changes with a mixture of amusement and concern. "You've become quite the attraction," she noted one evening as we reviewed the ranch accounts in her study. "Half the county's talking about you." I closed the ledger with a sigh. "I'd rather they talked about the quality of our cattle." "Give it time," she counseled. "Novelty fades. Results endure." 3 months had passed since the confrontation with Reeves. True to my prediction, he hadn't simply disappeared. After his humiliating dismissal, he'd taken up with the Carson outfit, a neighboring ranch owned by William Carson, a man known for his ruthless business practices and long-standing rivalry with the Blackwoods. The partnership between Martha and myself had stabilized Willow Creek's operations. With her knowledge of business and my willingness to work alongside the hands, gaining their respect through actions rather than demands, the ranch was beginning to prosper again. We'd even hired several Mexican cowboys from across the border, skilled men who'd been overlooked by other outfits due to prejudice. Miguel Hernandez, our new foreman, had 20 years of experience on some of the toughest spreads in northern Mexico. His knowledge of cattle and weather patterns had already proven invaluable. "Storm coming," he told me one morning as we rode the north pasture checking on a new herd. 2 days, maybe 3. Big one." I studied the clear blue sky skeptically. "How can you tell?" He smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. "The cattle. See how they're grazing? All facing the same direction, eating faster than usual. They know before we do." I'd learned to trust Miguel's instincts. "I'll tell Mrs. Blackwood we should move the herds to the southern valley. More shelter there." He nodded approval. "Good choice, Jeffa." The title still felt strange. Boss, owner, partner. Words I'd never expected to apply to me. Miguel studied me as we rode. "You still practice your shooting every day?" It wasn't a question. He'd seen me at dawn, setting up targets behind the barn where Crawford had first taught me. "Old habits," I replied. "Smart habits," he corrected. "A skill like yours needs maintenance. Besides," he added with surprising perception, "it connects you to him, no? To Crawford." I hadn't thought of it that way, but he was right. Those quiet morning sessions with Truth Finder were more than practice. They were a form of remembrance, of honoring the man who had changed my life. "Reeves isn't finished with Willow Creek," Miguel said after a moment. "Men like him don't accept defeat. Especially from a woman?" I finished. "A Mexican? Both," he acknowledged. "Be careful, Jeffa. He's been seen talking with some hard cases in town. Men who don't work cattle for a living." I appreciated the warning but wasn't surprised. Jackson Reeves wasn't the type to simply ride away from what he considered his due. That evening, as predicted, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Martha and I sat on the porch watching the distant lightning. "We should send someone to town for extra supplies," she suggested. "If Miguel's right about this storm, we could be cut off for days." "I'll go tomorrow," I offered. "There are some business matters I need to discuss with the bank anyway." She hesitated. "Perhaps you should take some of the men with you." "Because of Reeves?" I shook my head. "I won't live in fear of that man, Martha." "It's not fear, it's prudence," she countered. "Crawford would say the same. He didn't teach you to shoot so you could be reckless." I conceded the point. "I'll take Miguel and Luis. Will that satisfy your concern?" She nodded, though her eyes remained troubled. "There's something else we should discuss." I received a letter from a man named James Harrington. He's a lawyer from Austin, represents some very powerful cattle interests. What does he want with us? He's making offers on several ranches in the area. Carson's considering selling to him, and the Wilson spread already has. I frowned. Why? Money mainly. Good money from what I hear. But there's more too. She handed me the letter. Read it yourself. The letter was formal, businesslike, but between the polished phrases lay something unsettling. Harrington wasn't just buying ranches, he was buying water rights, specifically along the Brazos River tributaries that fed the entire region. If he controls all this water, I began. He controls every ranch for 50 miles, Martha finished. We'd be at his mercy for access. I considered this new threat. What do you want to do? I'm not selling, she said firmly. This land wasn't obtained properly, as you well know. But since then, I've tried to be a good steward. I won't hand it over to some corporate interest that sees it only as numbers on a ledger. Then we're agreed, I said. Willow Creek stays in our hands. The next morning dawned gray and heavy with coming rain. Miguel, Luis, and I set out for town early, hoping to complete our business before the storm broke. The ride was tense, each of us scanning the landscape for any sign of trouble. Millsville had grown from a small trading post to a respectable town serving the surrounding ranches. The main street now boasted a hotel, several saloons, a general store, and even a small bank where Martha and I conducted our business. We separated upon arrival, the men to gather supplies, me to meet with Mr. Hobson at the bank. The banker had initially been skeptical of our partnership, hardly concealing his disdain for my sudden elevation from servant to ranch owner. Over time, however, as Willow Creek's accounts grew healthier under our management, his attitude had shifted to grudging respect. Miss Vasquez, he greeted me with a nod. Please come in. I've prepared those documents you requested. Our business took longer than expected. By the time we finished, the sky had darkened considerably, and the first heavy drops of rain were beginning to fall. You might consider staying in town tonight, Hobson suggested, looking out at the gathering storm. The Wilkinson Hotel has decent rooms. I thanked him for the advice, but was determined to return to the ranch. Miguel and Luis were waiting outside the general store, the packhorse already loaded with supplies. We should hurry, Jeffa, Miguel sighed, eyeing the sky. This will be a bad one. As we mounted up, I noticed a group of men emerging from the saloon across the street. My hand instinctively moved toward Truth Finder when I recognized Jackson Reeves among them. He saw me at the same moment, his face hardening. Well, look what we have here, he called out, loud enough to be heard over the increasing rain. The shooting Maid and her Mexican friends. Miguel tensed beside me. Ignore him, we need to leave now. But Reeves was already crossing the muddy street, 5 rough-looking men trailing behind him. None wore the practical clothes of working cowboys. These were gunmen, hired muscle. Heard you turned down Harrington's offer, Reeves said, stopping a few paces away. Not very smart business. Our business is our own, I replied evenly. As is our decision. He smiled unpleasantly. Funny thing about decisions. Sometimes people reconsider, especially when circumstances change. Is that a threat, Mr. Reeves? Just an observation. Ranching's a dangerous profession. Accidents happen. Property changes hands. Miguel moved his horse slightly forward. We should go, Jeffa. The storm is coming. Reeves's smile widened. Yes, run along with your Mexican bodyguards. But remember what I said. Harrington doesn't like being refused, and neither do I. We rode out of town at a steady pace, not too fast to suggest fear, but quick enough to put distance between us and trouble. The rain was falling steadily now, drumming on our slickers and filling the air with the rich scent of wet earth. That man is like a scorpion, Luis muttered. Always ready to sting. Miguel nodded grimly. And now he has powerful friends. This Harrington must be paying well for Reeves to command men like those. I considered what we'd seen. Those weren't just hired hands. Those were gunmen. See, Miguel agreed. Professional men. You saw the way they stood, how they watched everything. Very dangerous. The implications were clear. Harrington wasn't simply making business offers. He was prepared to apply pressure when money alone didn't persuade. We were halfway back to Willow Creek when Miguel suddenly raised his hand, signaling a halt. Through the curtain of rain, I could make out riders ahead, positioned where the trail narrowed between two rocky outcroppings. Ambush, Miguel said quietly. I counted 5 shapes, the same men who'd been with Reeves in town. They must have ridden out immediately after our confrontation, taking a shortcut to get ahead of us. Options? I asked, keeping my voice calm despite the hammering of my heart. Miguel scanned our surroundings. There's a dry creek bed to our left. If we can reach it, we might circle around them. A rifle shot cracked through the rain, the bullet kicking up mud near our horse's hooves. The packhorse reared in panic, nearly losing its load. Too late for subtlety, Louise said, drawing his revolver. I slid Truth Finder from its holster, its weight reassuring in my hand. Split up, I ordered. Miguel, left toward the creek bed. Louise, right into those trees. I'll draw their attention forward. Jeffa, no, Miguel began. Do it, I cut him off. Crawford taught me how to handle situations like this. They hesitated, then complied, breaking away in opposite directions as another shot rang out. I urged my horse forward at a walk, making myself the most visible target while my companions vanished into the rain. One of the waiting men called out, "That's far enough, Miss Vasquez. Mr. Harrington just wants to talk business." Strange way to arrange a meeting, I called back. Usually people don't start with shooting. That was just to get your attention. No harm intended. I kept Truth Finder low against my leg, out of their sight. I'm listening. The apparent leader nudged his horse forward. He was older than the others, with a scar running down one cheek that pulled his mouth into a permanent half-smile. Mr. Harrington is prepared to double his original offer for Willow Creek, he said. That's very generous, considering the circumstances. What circumstances would those be? The scarred man gestured broadly. Times are changing. Small operations can't compete with what's coming. Mr. Harrington represents progress. Progress that arrives with guns and threats, he shrugged. Insurance policy. People can be stubborn about change. From the corner of my eye, I could see Miguel had reached the creek bed and was working his way closer to the ambusher's flank. Luis had disappeared into the tree line to the right. I'm afraid Mrs. Blackwood and I aren't interested in selling, regardless of the price, I said, deliberately keeping their attention focused on me. That's disappointing, the scarred man sighed. Mr. Reeves suggested you might be difficult. He also mentioned you fancy yourself quite the shooter. Mr. Reeves talks too much. Maybe so. But he's right about one thing. Willow Creek will be sold, one way or another. His hand moved toward his gun. Last chance to do this the easy way. Interesting choice of words, I replied, finally raising Truth Finder. Crawford always taught me that the easy way is rarely the right way. The scarred man's eyes widened at the sight of the distinctive revolver already aimed at him. Before he could draw, I fired. My bullet struck his shoulder, spinning him halfway around in his saddle. His men reached for their weapons, but Miguel and Luz opened fire from their concealed positions, catching the ambushers in a deadly crossfire. The gunfight lasted less than a minute. When it ended, 2 of Harrington's men lay dead in the mud. The others, including the scarred leader, had surrendered, their weapons thrown away. You're making a mistake, the scarred man growled, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Harrington won't stop with one attempt. Perhaps not, I acknowledged, but neither will we. Tell Mr. Harrington and Mr. Reeves that Willow Creek is not for sale. Not now, not ever. We disarmed them completely, took their horses, and left. Then to walk back to town in the pouring rain. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it sent a clear message. The storm hit with full force as we rode the final miles to Willow Creek. Lightning split the sky in jagged bursts, and the wind drove the rain horizontally. By the time we reached the ranch, we were soaked despite our slickers, and night had fallen early under the weight of storm clouds. Martha was waiting anxiously on the porch, lantern in hand. "Thank God," she exclaimed as we dismounted. "I was about to send men looking for you." Once inside, dry clothes donned and hot coffee in hand, I recounted our encounter with Reeves. In town and the subsequent ambush. "This is worse than I feared," Martha said gravely. "Harrington isn't just buying land, he's willing to kill for it." Miguel nodded. The men with Reeves were professionals. "This was planned." "We need to warn the other ranchers," I suggested. "Those who haven't sold yet. Harrington will target them next." "They won't all listen," Martha cautioned. "Most won't. Take kindly to warnings from a woman, especially a Mexican woman," I finished for her. "Nevertheless, we have to try." The storm raged through the night, the most violent anyone could remember in years. Trees were uprooted, fences flattened, and the creek that gave the ranch its name swelled to a raging torrent. We lost some cattle to the flooding, but our preparations had saved most of the herd. By morning, the rain had slackened to a steady drizzle. I stood on the porch surveying the damage when Miguel approached, his expression troubled. "Riders coming," he reported. "Many of them." I shaded my eyes, peering through the misty rain. A line of horsemen was approaching from the east, at least 15 men, moving with purpose. "Get everyone armed," I ordered. "But no shooting unless I give the word." Martha joined us, a shotgun in her hands. "Harrington's not wasting any time." But as the riders drew closer, I realized these were Harrington's men. They were neighboring ranchers, the Petersons, Old Man Wilson, the Garza brothers, and others, all looking grim and determined. John Peterson, a gruff man who'd barely acknowledged my existence before, dismounted first. "Miss Vasquez, Mrs. Blackwood," he greeted us with surprising respect. "What brings you all here, Mr. Peterson?" Martha asked. "News travels fast," he replied. "We heard about the ambush yesterday. 3 more ranchers got visitors last night, men making offers that didn't sound optional." One of the Garza brothers stepped forward. "They threatened my family, said accidents happen to those who don't cooperate." "Same language they used with us," I noted. Peterson nodded. "This Harrington fellow isn't just buying ranches. Word is he's damming up streams on the properties he's acquired, diverting water." This confirmed our fears about the water rights. "What do you want from us?" I asked. "Advice for starters," Peterson admitted. "You stood up to them. We aim to do the same, but we need to be smart about it." I exchanged glances with Martha, surprised by this turn of events. These proud men coming to us, to me, for leadership. "Come inside," I invited. "We have planning to do." Over the next hours, a strategy took shape. Each ranch would fortify its defenses, but more importantly, we would stand united. An attack on one would be met by resistance from all. We drafted a joint letter to the territorial governor describing Harrington's tactics and the threat to the region's water supply, signed by every rancher present. "This won't stop them immediately," I cautioned. "Harrington has money and men. Reeves knows the territory." "Maybe not," Old Man Wilson said thoughtfully, "but it changes the calculation. They wanted easy targets, isolated decisions. Now they face organized resistance." As the meeting concluded and the ranchers prepared to leave, Peterson approached me privately. "I owe you an apology, Miss Vasquez. When I heard Crawford had left you half this ranch, I thought, well, it doesn't matter what I thought. You've proven yourself." "Thank you, Mr. Peterson, but I don't need validation of what I already know to be true." He smiled slightly. No, I suppose you don't. Crawford saw something in you from the beginning. Took me longer, but I see it now too. After they departed, Martha and I stood watching them ride away. An unlikely alliance formed out of common threat. You realize what just happened? Martha asked. They didn't come to me, the established rancher. They came to you. I hadn't considered that aspect. They came to both of us. She shook her head. No, Elena. They might have been polite to me, but it was your lead they were following. Your stand against Reeves that inspired them. I wasn't entirely comfortable with this assessment, but before I could respond, a ranch hand came running toward us. Riders coming from the west, he called out. Different group. Indeed, another party was approaching, smaller than the first, but moving faster. As they drew nearer, I recognized the scarred man from the ambush, his shoulder bandaged. Beside him rode Jackson Reeves and a well-dressed stranger I presumed to be Harrington himself. Scenes were popular today, Martha commented dryly, raising her shotgun. Let me handle this, I said, touching Truth Finder for reassurance. The trio reined in at a respectful distance from the house. The well-dressed man urged his horse forward a few steps. Mrs. Blackwood, Miss Vasquez, he called out. James Harrington. At your service. I believe we have business to discuss. Our business concluded yesterday, I replied evenly, when your men tried to ambush us. Harrington affected a look of surprise. A terrible misunderstanding. These overzealous gentlemen acted without my knowledge or approval. Is that so? Martha interjected. Strange coincidence that they carried your exact offer. Nevertheless, Harrington continued smoothly, I've come personally to rectify the situation. My offer still stands double the market value for Willow Creek. As we've already stated, the ranch is not for sale. Harrington's pleasant expression hardened slightly. Perhaps you don't fully appreciate the opportunity before you. The ranching business is changing. Small operations cannot survive what's coming. If you mean your water diversion schemes, we're well aware, I said, as are all the neighboring ranchers. For the first time, Harrington looked genuinely surprised. Reeves leaned over to whisper something to him. I see, Harrington said. Finally, you've been busy forming alliances. Impressive, but ultimately futile. Progress cannot be stopped, Miss Vasquez. This isn't progress, I countered. It's theft disguised as business. Strong words from a former maid, Reeves sneered. Careful, Mr. Reeves, I warned. Remember what happened last time you underestimated me. The scarred man's hand drifted toward his gun, but Harrington stopped him with a gesture. We're civilized people, Harrington said. Surely we can reach an accommodation that benefits everyone. The only accommodation I'm interested in is your withdrawal from this region, I replied. Leave the water as it is, leave the ranchers to their land. Harrington studied me with newfound interest. You know, Mr. Reeves described you as a problem, but I'm beginning to see you as a potential asset. Someone with your determination could be valuable in my organization. I'm not for hire. Everyone has a price, Miss Vasquez. Not everyone, Mr. Harrington, and certainly not me. He sighed theatrically. Then I fear we've reached an impasse. But consider this a friendly warning. The offer I've made expires today. What comes next will be considerably less pleasant for everyone involved. With that, he tipped his hat and turned his horse. Reeves lingered a moment longer, his gaze filled with malice. This ain't over, he promised quietly before following Harrington. We watched them ride away, the threat hanging in the air like the remnants of the storm. What? Now? Martha asked. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility not just for Willow Creek, but for all the ranchers who had placed their trust in me. Now, I said firmly, we prepare for what comes next. Crawford had taught me about shooting, but his most valuable lessons had been about standing one's ground, about finding the courage to fight for what was right. As I watched Harrington and his men disappear into the distance, I silently thanked my mentor once again. The true test was just beginning, but for the first time, we wouldn't face it alone. The next week passed in a flurry of activity as ranches throughout the region prepared for Harrington's retaliation. At Willow Creek, we fortified key positions, established regular patrols, and trained everyone, including the women and older children, in basic firearms use. I personally oversaw shooting lessons, surprised by how many had never properly handled a gun before. "Keep both eyes open," I instructed Martha's cook, Mrs. Winters, as she nervously aimed at a row of bottles. "The gun is just a tool, like your rolling pin. Respect it, but don't fear it." The older woman squeezed the trigger, her shot going wide. "I'll stick to my rolling pin, thank you very much," she muttered. "More reliable. Try again," I encouraged. Crawford always said mastery comes from repetition. The alliance of ranchers we'd formed held strong, with regular messengers traveling between properties to share information. Peterson and the Garza brothers had taken charge of organizing joint patrols along the boundaries of our combined lands. Together, we watched, waited, and prepared. Harrington's first move was more subtle than we anticipated. Rather than direct aggression, he attempted to isolate us economically. Merchants in Millsville suddenly found reasons not to serve Willow Creek or other resisting ranches. Supplies we'd ordered were delayed or unavailable. The bank informed U.S. that our line of credit could not be extended. "He's squeezing us," Martha observed grimly as we reviewed our dwindling inventory. "Trying to starve us out before risking open conflict." "Then we adapt," I replied. "Miguel, what are our options for supplies?" The foreman considered the problem. "There's a Mexican trading post 30 miles south. They won't care about Harrington's influence. Too far for regular trips," Martha pointed out. "Not if we coordinate with the other ranches," I suggested. "One large expedition could bring back enough for everyone." Miguel nodded slowly. "It could work. My cousin runs supply trains from Laredo. If I send word, he could meet us halfway with whatever we need." The plan came together quickly. Each ranch contributed wagons, men, and a list of essential supplies. Miguel would lead the expedition, accompanied by enough armed riders to discourage interference. The night before their departure, I found Miguel by the corral, checking saddles and weapons one final time. "You should get some rest," I told him. "Tomorrow will be a long day." He nodded but continued his preparations. "Jeffa, there's something you should know. My contacts in town say Harrington has sent for more men professionals from Fort Worth. Gunfighters? See, the worst kind. Men who enjoy the work." I absorbed this news grimly. "When?" "They could arrive any time. Perhaps a week, perhaps less. Then your supply mission becomes even more critical. We need to be prepared before they get here." Miguel hesitated, then said, "There's something else. Reeves has been asking questions about you, about your past, where you came from." This surprised me. Why would he care about that? Men like Reeves hate losing. Even more, they hate losing to someone they consider beneath them. He's looking for something to use against you, something to break this alliance you've built. I considered this. My past held no particular secrets, but the idea of Reeves investigating me was unsettling. "Be careful," Miguel added quietly. "And watch Martha. She's not as strong as she pretends." His warning proved prophetic. The supply expedition departed at dawn, leaving Willow Creek with a reduced force. By midday, I sensed something was wrong. Martha, normally active in ranch operations, remained in her room, sending word she was indisposed. When she finally emerged that evening, I was shocked by her appearance. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she poured herself a generous glass of whiskey. "Are you ill?" I asked with concern. "Just tired," she replied, not meeting my eyes. "Martha," I said gently, We've been partners too long for such obvious lies." She sighed heavily, then reached into her pocket and withdrew a letter. "This came yesterday. I didn't want to burden you with it." The letter was from Harrington, but unlike his business proposals, this was intensely personal. It detailed Martha's late husband's criminal activities in acquiring the ranch facts we already knew, but went further, threatening to make this information public, to bring charges of fraud and conspiracy against Martha herself. "He can't prove any of this," I said after reading it. "Your husband is dead, and these allegations are years old." "He doesn't need to prove it in court," Martha replied bitterly. "Just in public opinion, my family name would be ruined. Everything we've built here, so that's his new strategy. When force fails, try blackmail." She took a long drink. "Elena, perhaps we should reconsider his offer. For the good of everyone. Is that what Crawford would advise?" I challenged. "To surrender to threats?" Martha's expression hardened. "My brother is dead, and his noble principles died with him." "No," I contradicted firmly. "They live on in what he taught me, in what we're doing here." He knew the truth about this ranch's history, yet he still fought to preserve it, to make it something better. "And it got him killed," she snapped. "Just as it might get us all killed." I took the glass from her hand, setting it aside. "Martha, listen to me. Harrington sent this letter because our alliance is working." "I can shoot," she said simply when I raised an eyebrow. "Thomas made sure of that, even if I'm not in your league." From our elevated position, we had a perfect view of the water station and the men below, still unaware of our presence. I signaled to Miguel's group, now in position for the frontal approach. "Remember, I told my small team, aim for their horses first. We want to prevent escape more than inflict casualties." Martha looked at me curiously. Not what I expected from someone. "In your position." "What position is that?" "Someone with every reason to want revenge against men like Reeves." I checked Truthfinder's cylinder one final time. Crawford taught me that revenge is a poison that harms the one who carries it more than their target. Justice is what we're after here, not vengeance. Below, Miguel's group had started their approach, fanning out to present multiple targets. One of Harrington's men spotted them and shouted a warning. Immediately, the guards took up defensive positions, weapons ready. "Hold," I cautioned my team. "Wait for my signal." Reeves stepped forward, calling out to Miguel's approaching force. "This is private property now. Turn around if you don't want trouble." Miguel's reply was measured but firm. "This water serves all ranches in the region. By what right do you claim it?" "By right of purchase," Reeves shot back. "Mr. Harrington owns Carson's spread now, and with it, the water rights." "Purchased with Carson's blood," Miguel responded. "We know what happened this morning." Reeves spread his hands in mock innocence. "Business disagreements sometimes turn ugly. Nothing to do with us." The tension was building. Harrington's men had the advantage of cover, while Miguel's group was exposed on their approach. I could see Reeves subtly signaling his men to spread out, preparing to open fire. "Now," I whispered to my team, "horses first." Our first volley was precisely targeted. 4 horses reared and bolted as bullets struck the ground near their hooves. The unexpected fire from the ridge threw Harrington's men into momentary confusion, giving Miguel's group time to close the distance and take cover. Reeves recovered quickly, bellowing orders and returning fire toward our position on the ridge. But we had chosen well. The angle made it difficult for them to target us effectively. The firefight intensified, with bullets whining through the air from multiple directions as Peterson's group joined the engagement, cutting off the retreat route. Harrington's men found themselves caught in a 3-way crossfire, their superior position at the water station negated by our coordinated attack. Through my spyglass, I could see Reeves growing increasingly desperate, realizing they were outmaneuvered and outnumbered. 3 of his men were already down, wounded or unwilling to continue the fight. We need to end this before someone gets killed, I told my team. I'm going to try something. Before they could object, I stood up, making myself visible on the ridgeline. Taking careful aim with Truth Finder, I fired a single shot that struck the water sluice directly above Reeves's head. Water burst from the damaged gate, spraying over him and his remaining men. The next shot won't miss, Reeves, I called down, my voice carrying clearly in the sudden lull. Throw down your weapons. For a tense moment, I thought he might refuse. But looking around at his dwindling forces and three-sided trap, Reeves finally made the practical choice. With a curse, he threw his gun aside, signaling his men to do the same. The confrontation was over almost as quickly as it had begun. We disarmed Harrington's men and bound them securely. Only one had been seriously wounded, shot in the leg during the exchange. Miguel's cousin, a former army medic, tended to him. While we decided what to do with our prisoners, we can't just let them go, Peterson argued. They'll head straight back to Harrington, and we can't hold them indefinitely, I countered. We're ranchers, not jailers. Reeves watched this discussion with undisguised contempt. You think this changes anything? He sneered. Harrington has 50 more men like these. You've just signed your death warrants. I approached him calmly. Perhaps we've demonstrated that your employer's methods won't work here. You really believe that? He laughed harshly. A Mexican woman and a bunch of small-time ranchers against a man with Harrington's connections? He has judges in his pocket, politicians on his payroll. And yet here you are, I observed, defeated by the very people you dismissed. His face darkened with anger. This isn't over, Vasquez. Not by a long shot. You're right about that, I agreed. But the next move isn't yours to make. We ultimately decided to send Harrington's men back to town with a clear message. Any further aggression would be met with united resistance. We kept only Reeves, considering him too valuable and dangerous to release. Harrington won't negotiate. For my release, he warned as we led him away. I'm expendable to him. We'll see, I replied. Men like Harrington always surprise you with what they truly value. As we dismantled the half-built dam and restored the water flow to its normal channels, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and foreboding. We had won this skirmish decisively, but the larger conflict remained unresolved. Martha joined me by the water's edge as the men completed their work. What happens now? She asked quietly. I watched the water flow, thinking of Crawford's lessons about patience and persistence. Now we demonstrate that unity is stronger than intimidation. We've shown we can defend ourselves. Next, we need to take the fight to Harrington himself. How? He stays hidden, protected by his money and connections. I smiled slightly, a plan already forming. By using the one thing he values more than this land or its water, his reputation. The statements we prepared about our own pasts were just the beginning. Now we gather everything we can about Harrington's operations, his methods, his political connections. Martha's eyes widened in understanding. Information as ammunition. Exactly. Crawford always said the most powerful weapon isn't the one that fires the loudest. It's the one no one sees coming until it's too late. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the reclaimed water station, I felt Crawford's presence almost tangibly, as if he were standing beside me, nodding approval at how I'd applied his lessons. The true test still lay ahead. Harrington would not accept this defeat easily. His response would likely be swift and violent. But for the first time since this conflict began, I felt the balance shifting in our favor. Sometimes the greatest strength comes not from standing alone, but from teaching others to stand with you. Harrington's response came sooner than we expected. The morning after our confrontation at the water station, a rider arrived at Willow Creek bearing an official-looking document, not from Harrington, but from Judge Clayton in Millsville. An injunction, Martha said grimly, scanning the paper, ordering us to cease unlawful interference with Carson property and to release Jackson Reeves immediately. I took the document, noting the elaborate legal language and the judge's authoritative signature. Harrington showing his influence. Using the law as another weapon. What do we do? Martha asked. Defy a court order? It was a difficult question. Our alliance had demonstrated willingness to defend ourselves with force when necessary, but openly defying legal authority, even corrupted authority, was another matter entirely. We need legal counsel, I decided. Someone not under Harrington's influence. Peterson, who had stayed at Willow Creek to help coordinate our united defense, suggested a solution. My cousin practices law in Austin. He's tangled with corporate interests before and isn't afraid of powerful men. I could send for him. Do it, I agreed. But in the meantime, we need to respond to this injunction without appearing to ignore it completely. After careful consideration, we drafted a response that acknowledged receipt of the order but questioned its jurisdiction, noting that the water station served multiple properties, not just Carson's ranch. We also demanded a formal hearing before any action would be taken regarding Reeves. This buys us time, I explained as our messenger departed with the response. And time is what we need to gather the information that will truly threaten Harrington. Martha looked skeptical. What information could possibly threaten a man with his resources? The kind that would concern his investors and political allies, I replied. No man builds an empire like Harrington's without leaving traces of questionable dealings, without making compromises that wouldn't bear public scrutiny. That afternoon, I visited Reeves in the storeroom where we were keeping him under guard. He sat on a makeshift bed, watching me with thinly veiled contempt as I entered. Come to gloat? He asked, his voice hoarse from disuse. No, I set a canteen of water and a plate of food beside him. I came to offer you a choice. He laughed. Without humor. What choice could you possibly offer me? A chance to protect yourself, I said simply. Harrington's using legal means to secure your release, but I wonder if that's because he values your service or because he fears what you might reveal. Reeves stiffened slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. Men like Harrington don't build empires without breaking laws, without leaving witnesses who could testify against them. I paused, watching his reaction. Witnesses like you, Reeves. I'm loyal to my employer, he insisted, but there was a new wariness in his eyes. Admirable. But is he equally loyal to you? You said yourself he considers you expendable. Reeves shifted uncomfortably. What exactly are you proposing? Information. About Harrington's operations, his methods, his vulnerabilities. In exchange, when this is over, you walk away alive and free. And if I refuse, I stood to leave. Then you take your chances with whatever Harrington has planned. Maybe he'll secure your release and welcome you back. Or maybe he'll decide. You've become a liability, a loose end that needs tying up. I left him with that thought, knowing it would gnaw at him more effectively than any threat I could make. Crawford had taught me that sometimes the most powerful leverage comes from simply planting the right seed of doubt. Peterson's cousin, Andrew Peterson, arrived 2 days later, a sharp-featured man with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense manner. After reviewing our situation, he confirmed our concerns about Judge Clayton. He's firmly in Harrington's pocket, Andrew explained. Has been for years. The injunction won't hold up under scrutiny from a higher court, but that would take months of legal wrangling. Months we don't have, I noted. He nodded agreement. Exactly, but there's another approach. Harrington's entire strategy depends on appearing legitimate to his investors and political allies. If that facade cracks, everything else becomes vulnerable. This aligned perfectly with my thinking. What do you need from us? Everything you have on his operations. Records of threats, witness statements about the attack on Carson's ranch. Details of the water diversion scheme. Anything that shows the reality behind the respectable business veneer. We spent the next day compiling all our evidence, including statements from neighboring ranchers and accounts of Harrington's strong-arm tactics. Martha contributed records of the original land transfers that had established Willow Creek, showing patterns that connected to Harrington's current activities. As we worked, a nervous ranch hand interrupted us. "Riders coming," he announced. "A lot of them." We hurried outside to find a column of horsemen approaching, not gunfighters this time, but 10 uniformed men led by Sheriff Taylor from Millsville. "That's not good," Martha murmured beside me. Andrew Peterson stepped forward as the sheriff dismounted. "Sheriff Taylor, what brings you all the way out here with such a show of force?" Taylor, a heavy-set man with a perpetually weary expression, held up a document. "Court order, signed by Judge Clayton. I'm here to enforce the injunction regarding interference with Carson property and to take custody of Jackson Reeves." "We filed a formal response questioning the jurisdiction of that order," Andrew replied smoothly. "As legal counsel for these ranchers, I must insist on a proper hearing before any action is taken." The sheriff sighed heavily. "Look, Peterson, I'm just doing my job." The judge was very clear. "And I'm doing mine," Andrew cut in. "You know as well as I do that this injunction wouldn't stand up to proper legal scrutiny. Harrington is using the court as a personal enforcement tool." Taylor shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his deputies. "I've got orders. You also have." "A duty to uphold the law properly," Andrew countered. "Not just follow orders from a compromised judge." I stepped forward, sensing an opportunity. Sheriff Taylor had always struck me as a man more interested in maintaining peace than in taking sides. "Sheriff, before you take any action, there's something you should see." Reluctantly, he followed me inside, where I showed him the evidence. We'd compiled particularly the eyewitness accounts of the attack on Carson's ranch. 5 people died there, I said quietly. Murdered on Harrington's orders over a business disagreement. Is that the kind of law you want to enforce? Taylor studied the statements, his expression growing more troubled. "This is serious, but it's not my jurisdiction to investigate murders at the Carson place. That's county business." "Then take it to the county authorities," I urged. "But ask yourself if Harrington is willing to murder Carson and his people over a price negotiation. What else is he capable of? And do you want to be remembered as the man who helped him?" The sheriff was clearly conflicted. "I still have to serve this order." Andrew Peterson intervened. "How about a compromise? You've technically served the order by delivering it. Give us 48 hours to present our case to the circuit judge in Austin, who has authority over Judge Clayton. If we fail, we'll comply fully with the order." After considerable debate, Taylor reluctantly agreed. It wasn't a victory, but it bought us precious time we desperately needed. As the sheriff and his deputies rode away, Martha turned to me with concern. 48 hours isn't much time to reach Austin, present a case, and return with a counter order. "No," I agreed. "Which is why I'm leaving for Austin immediately. Andrew can prepare the legal arguments while I gather additional evidence we'll need." "What evidence?" Peterson asked. I smiled slightly. "The kind Harrington won't expect. But first, I need to have one more conversation with Reeves." When I returned to Reeves's makeshift cell, I found him more receptive than before. News of the sheriff's visit had clearly rattled him. "They're coming for me," he stated flatly as I entered. "Not yet," I replied. "We've bought some time. But yes, Harrington is using the courts to retrieve you." "Or to silence me," he muttered, almost to himself. "That's still a possibility." I acknowledged. "Unless you have something valuable enough to ensure your safety." Reeves studied me for a long moment, calculation evident in his eyes. "What exactly do you want to know?" "Everything. How Harrington operates, who his political connections are, where his money really comes from. And in exchange, your freedom, as I promised before. Plus, my personal guarantee that your cooperation will be made known only to those who need to know, not to Harrington. He paced the small room, weighing his options. Finally, he turned to me. Harrington's water scheme isn't just about controlling ranches. It's about the railroad. This was unexpected. What does water have to do with the railroad? Everything. The new spur line from Fort Worth needs water for the steam engines. Whoever controls the water sources along the route controls where the stations will be built. And whoever controls the stations controls which towns grow and which die. I finished, understanding dawning. This isn't just about ranches, it's about reshaping the entire region. Reeves nodded grimly. Harrington has investors from back east, railroad men, bankers, politicians. They've already purchased land around planned station sites. Once the railroad goes through, that land will be worth 20 times what they paid. The scale of the scheme was breathtaking. No wonder Harrington was willing to resort to violence. The stakes were far higher than I'd realized. I need names, I pressed. Documents if you have them. I can give you names, Reeves agreed. Some documents are hidden at Carson's place, in a lockbox beneath the floorboards of the foreman's cabin. Harrington doesn't know about them. I kept them as insurance. Smart man, I commented. Just a survivor, he corrected. In this business, you learn to protect yourself, even from your employer. Armed with this new information, I prepared for the journey to Austin. Miguel insisted on accompanying me, along with 4 of his most trusted vaqueros. Andrew Peterson would follow the next day with the legal documents, while Martha and John Peterson maintained our defenses at Willow Creek. Be careful, Martha warned as I mounted up. Harrington will have men watching the roads. That's why we're not taking the roads, I replied. Crawford showed me old trails through the hill country. Longer route, but safer. She pressed truth. Finder into my hands. Take this. Thomas would want you to have it with you. The journey to Carson's ranch was tense but uneventful. The property lay abandoned, the charred remains of the main house, a stark reminder of Harrington's ruthlessness. The foreman's cabin, some distance from the main buildings, had escaped the fire. Keep watch, I instructed Miguel and his men as I dismounted. This feels too easy. Inside the small cabin, I located the loose floorboards Reeves had described. The lockbox beneath them contained exactly what he'd promised: documents detailing land purchases, around planned railroad stations, lists of investors, and copies of bribes paid to various officials, including Judge Clayton. This is better than I hoped, I told Miguel as we secured the documents. With this evidence, a shot rang out, splintering wood near my head. We dove for cover as more bullets tore through the cabin's thin walls. Ambush! Miguel shouted, returning fire. Through a window. I counted at least 5 shooters surrounding the cabin. Harrington's men must have been watching the property, expecting someone to come for the documents. We need to reach the horses, I said, checking Truth Finder's cylinder. Miguel nodded grimly. I'll draw their fire to the front. You take the back door. Make for the trees. My men will cover you. Before I could protest this self-sacrificing plan, he was already moving, firing rapidly through the front windows while shouting orders in Spanish to his vaqueros. I clutched the document pouch tightly and slipped out the back door during the ensuing fusillade. Keeping low, I raced toward the tree line, bullets kicking up dirt around me. One of Miguel's men provided covering fire, enabling me to reach the relative safety of the trees. From there, I circled back toward our horses, which had scattered during the initial shooting. Truth Finder felt reassuringly solid in my hand as I moved silently through the underbrush, just as Crawford had taught me during our hunting lessons. The gunfire at the cabin had intensified. I could hear Miguel and his men returning shots, keeping Harrington's gunmen occupied. But they couldn't hold out forever with limited ammunition. I located one of our horses, then spotted 2 of Harrington's men guarding the others. They were focused on the cabin, unaware of my approach. Crawford's voice seemed to whisper in my memory. The element of surprise is worth more than the fastest draw. Taking careful aim, I fired twice in rapid succession. 1 man fell immediately. The second managed to return fire before my third shot found its mark. The sound of hoofbeats told me the remaining horses had bolted at the gunfire. The shooting at the cabin had paused momentarily. "Miguel," I called out. "Horses to the south, run for it." The coordinated response was immediate. Miguel and his remaining men burst from the cabin, firing as they ran toward my position. 2 made it to the trees. 1 fell halfway across the open ground. 3 men down, Miguel reported breathlessly as he reached me. 2 of ours, 1 of theirs. I handed him the reins of the horse I'd recovered. "Take the documents." "Get them." "To Austin. I'll help the others." He shook his head firmly. "No, Jeffa. You take the documents. They're after you specifically. Harrington knows you're the heart of this resistance. We'll hold them here." "I won't leave you," I protested. "You must," he insisted. "This is bigger than any of us now." He pressed something into my hand, a folded map. "Alternative routes to Austin, marked by my cousin. Now go." With a heavy heart but clear purpose, I mounted the horse and rode hard for the tree line, the precious documents secured inside my jacket. Behind me, gunfire erupted again as Miguel and his remaining man provided covering fire for my escape. The journey to Austin became a harrowing game of cat and mouse. True to Miguel's warning, Harrington had men watching the main roads. Twice I narrowly avoided patrols by hiding in creek beds or dense brush. The alternative routes on the map took me through rough country terrain most riders would avoid, which made it perfect for evasion. I traveled primarily at night, resting during daylight hours in concealed locations. Crawford's lessons on survival and tracking served me well, helping me detect signs of pursuit and cover my own trail. By the 3rd day, exhaustion was taking its toll. My horse was nearly spent and my supplies were dwindling. But Austin was close now, perhaps a half days. Right if I pushed hard. As dawn broke on that 3rd day, I crested a hill to find 3 riders blocking the trail ahead. For a moment, my heart sank, thinking Harrington's men had somehow anticipated my route. Then I recognized the lead rider, Andrew Peterson, accompanied by 2 men I didn't know. "Miss Vasquez," he called, relieved. "Thank God we've been searching these trails since yesterday. How did you find me?" I asked as I approached. "Martha suggested you might take Crawford's old hunting routes. Said he'd shown them to you." He studied my haggard appearance with concern. "You look like you've been through hell." "Close enough," I replied. "I have the documents evidence of Harrington's entire scheme, but Miguel and his men, they stayed behind to cover my escape. I don't know if they survived." Andrew's expression turned grim. "All the more reason to make this count. Come, we have fresh horses waiting at a farm just ahead. We need to reach Austin by nightfall." The remaining journey passed in a blur of exhaustion. Andrew explained that he had arranged a meeting with Judge Thornton, a circuit judge known for his integrity, and with a reporter from the Austin Chronicle, who had previously investigated corporate land-grabbing schemes. "Timing is critical," he emphasized. "Harrington's associates are pressuring officials in Austin too. We need to present our evidence before they can interfere." By sunset, we reached Austin, a growing city of stone buildings and bustling streets. That seemed a world away from the range wars of the Panhandle. Andrew led us directly to a handsome residence on a quiet street, where Judge Thornton was waiting. The judge was older than I expected, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they saw. He listened intently as we presented our evidence: the documents from Carson's ranch, statements from neighboring ranchers, and accounts of Harrington's strong-arm tactics. "This is extremely serious," he said finally. "Bribery, conspiracy, Murder far beyond a simple land dispute. If even half of this can be corroborated, it would warrant immediate action. We need more than action, Your Honor, I said firmly. We need protection for the ranchers who have stood against Harrington. As we speak, they're defending their homes against his gunmen. The judge nodded thoughtfully. I can issue orders. Immediately suspending Judge Clayton's injunctions, authorizing the Texas Rangers to investigate the situation, and freezing Harrington's operations pending full review. The Rangers? Andrew asked, surprised. This is precisely the kind of situation they were formed to address, Judge Thornton explained. Corporate interests using violence to seize land and resources from legitimate settlers. A wave of relief washed over me. The Texas Rangers represented real authority professional lawmen with a reputation for effectiveness and integrity. How quickly can they respond? I asked, thinking of Martha and the others at Willow Creek. I can dispatch orders tonight. They could have men in the area within 2 days. The judge's expression softened slightly. You've shown remarkable courage, Miss Vasquez. Crawford would be proud. I stared at him, startled. You knew Thomas Crawford? He smiled faintly. We served together many years ago. He was a good man, one of the best. When I heard his name connected with this case, I took particular interest. This unexpected connection felt like Crawford's hand reaching out once more, guiding events even after his death. The next morning, the Austin Chronicle ran a detailed expose of Harrington's operations, naming his political connections and detailing the railroad scheme. Judge Thornton's orders were dispatched, and by midday, word reached us that a company of Rangers was already heading toward the disputed territories. Andrew insisted I rest in Austin another day before attempting the return journey. You're exhausted, and it's safer to travel with the Rangers when they pass through. Though anxious to return to Willow Creek, I recognized the wisdom in his advice. The respite gave me time to compose a detailed statement for the Rangers, ensuring they understood the full context of our struggle against Harrington. On the morning of our planned departure, unexpected news arrived. A telegram for Andrew reported that Harrington himself had fled Austin, withdrawing substantial funds from several banks before disappearing. His investors, panicked by the public exposure, were disavowing any knowledge of illegal activities. This is better than we could have hoped, Andrew said, showing me the telegram. With Harrington on the run, his entire operation will crumble. What about Reeves? I asked. According to this, he's cooperating fully with authorities, confirming everything in the documents and adding details of his own. I smiled slightly. Remembering our conversations, he's a survivor, always looking for the safest position. We departed Austin that afternoon, riding with a detachment of 6 Texas Rangers led by Captain Hayes, a stern-faced man with a legendary reputation for fairness and determination. The return journey felt entirely different from my desperate flight to Austin. No need to hide or travel by night. No constant fear of ambush. As we approached the region around Willow Creek, signs of the conflict were evident. Abandoned guard posts, barricaded ranch houses, fields left untended as everyone focused on defense. Your alliance held strong, Captain Hayes observed as we rode. Most ranchers would have broken under this kind of pressure. They're good people, I replied simply. Just needed someone to show them that standing together was possible. At Willow Creek, we found a scene of cautious celebration. Word of Harrington's flight and the Rangers' approach had preceded us. Martha rushed out to meet me, embracing me with uncharacteristic emotion. You did it, she said, her voice thick with feeling. Thomas would be so proud. The next days brought a flurry of activity as the Rangers established order throughout the region. Harrington's remaining gunmen either surrendered or fled. Judge Clayton was suspended pending investigation. The water diversions were dismantled, restoring normal flow to all properties. Most importantly, Miguel and one of his men had survived the ambush at Carson's ranch, though both were wounded. They had managed to escape into the hills and eventually make their way back to friendly territory. "I knew you would succeed, Jeffa," Miguel told me from his sickbed, his smile weak but genuine. "Crawford chose well when he brought you here." A week after our return, the Allied ranchers gathered at Willow Creek to discuss the future. With Harrington gone and his scheme exposed, the immediate threat had passed. But the larger questions remained: how to protect themselves from similar threats in the future, how to manage shared resources like water, how to build on the unity they had found. "We need formal agreements," Peterson suggested. "Written terms. For water sharing, mutual defense, maybe even cooperative marketing of our cattle." The discussion continued for hours, sometimes heated, but always respectful. I observed more than participated, watching with quiet satisfaction as these once isolated ranchers worked together to secure their common future. As the meeting concluded, Peterson approached me privately. "We've all been talking," he said, gesturing to the departing ranchers. "We want you to head the association we're forming, to be our voice in dealing with outside interests." The offer stunned me. "Why me?" "There are more experienced ranchers among you." "Experience isn't what we need most," he replied. "We need someone who can see beyond old boundaries and rivalries. Someone who proved that unity is stronger than division." He smiled slightly. "Besides, after watching you outshoot, outthink, and outfight Harrington's entire operation, I don't think anyone's going to question your qualifications." That evening, as the sun set over Willow Creek, I stood on the porch with Martha, watching the golden light transform the land we had fought so hard to protect. "What will you do now?" she asked quietly. I considered the question, feeling the weight of truth finder on my hip, remembering all of Crawford's lessons that had brought me to this moment. "Continue what we started," I replied finally. "Build something worth fighting for." "Crawford saw this potential in you from the beginning," Martha mused. "He told me once that sometimes the most powerful force for change is the person everyone else underestimates." I smiled, thinking of how far I had come from that day in the cantina when an old marksman had noticed a maid's quick hands and steady nerves. "The rancher laughed at the maid," I said softly, "never imagining she could silence an entire ranch with her shooting." Martha chuckled. "And much more than that, it turns out." In the fading light, I felt Crawford's presence one last time, not as a ghost or memory, but as the living legacy of everything he had taught me. The skills, the courage, the vision of something better than what came before. Some lessons aren't just about survival. They're about transformation, about becoming the person you were meant to be, even when the whole world tells you it's impossible. If this story touched something in you, remember that the most powerful weapons we possess aren't always the ones that fire bullets. Sometimes they're courage, determination, and the willingness to stand for what's right, even when standing alone. And sometimes, the person everyone dismisses today becomes the leader they follow tomorrow. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.